Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
Serious, what are some creepy urban legends? Episode 4. As a kid, I used to go to this Bible camp every summer at a place called Dwight Mission. This place used to be a boarding school for Choctaw, Cherokee, Seminole kids, but I think it shut down in the 50s or 60s and was bought by a very Christian family to make a Bible camp. There are a bunch of buildings: mess hall, boys' dorm, girls' dorm, and admin building, which used to be the schoolhouse itself. Boys always wake up in the middle of the night because they're too hot. This is tied back to shortly after Bible camp opened, when they would lock the dorms at night to prevent sneaking out and hanky-punky. Some boys were smoking in the dorm caught fire, they couldn't get out, 7 teenage boys died. Tragic. The scary thing was the admin building. It was condemned as unsafe, so no one was allowed to go inside. They started using it for storage anyway. To give you a picture of this building, it was built in the 1800s, post-Civil War. It had a basement with a classic boiler, 2 floors of classroom, and a theater that took up the entire top floor/attic. Looking at this building at night always had strange results. Sometimes you see lights coming out of the window, likely mundane, counselors doing stuff at midnight with flashlights, and almost always a figure in the theater window. Inside is a trip, too. Spooky acoustics, and an overwhelming feeling of dread coming from the basement. The actual story of the admin building is so tragic. Apparently, it was a Friday in winter. 2 students kept acting up, so the teacher locked them in the boiler room as a timeout. The teacher then forgot to let them out before the weekend. While trying to escape, the boys somehow damaged the boiler and started a fire. They died, but the building was mostly fine. When the teacher came back on Monday and realized what happened, he hung himself in the theater. That is the swing figure you see at night. There was this girl who liked to go to the cemetery to sit on the graves and used to read there. She went there day after day to relax, and someday, she found a flower on the grave where she used to sit, and found that sweet, so she took the flower home. That night, the phone started ringing. She picks it up, and a genderless and painful voice says, "Where is my flower?" "What?" she replied. The voice repeated, "I want my flower." The girl immediately hung up. After some time, the phone rang again and she picked it up. It was the same voice again, so once more she hung up, and told her parents about it. When the voice called again, they started talking and asking it to stop, but they would call every day, all the time. The girl started having a mental breakdown, because the flower had already died, and the person still wanted the flower. Her parents got worried, and said they could give any flower, even a bouquet. That flower can't be replaced. No other flower means as much to me. Bring my flower back to my grave. The girl started going insane, mumbling to herself in fear, worrying the ghost could go after her. She starts getting sick, and someday, she ended up dying, and the voice finally stopped calling. I don't remember the title of this story, but I think it's originally Brazilian. I read it at school at some point, can't remember when. In my culture, we have the legend of a spirit that kills men in their dreams. It is called the Dab Tsog, pronounced like Dazar. I grew up not knowing about this legend, but when I saw a video on the YouTube channel Bedtime Stories, I realized that my family had always avoided talking about it. Essentially, it is a phantom/demon/spirit that kills men in their sleep. Numerous different stories circulate amongst the community as to why this happens. People allege infidelity, addictions to alcohol and other drugs, or other sins that would be dishonorable to the man's family. In our Hmong culture, where this particular legend comes from, men are expected to lead and protect their families. Any actions that do not reflect this are highly frowned upon by other community members, especially the elders. Our original religion, best described as a sort of Southeast Asian shaman paganism, correlates directly with this, as we worship and revere the spirits of our ancestors. Because many Hmong immigrated to the US and Europe after the Vietnam War, it is believed that the Dab Tsog was unhappy with our change in cultures and practices. Although we have changed extraordinarily little in values, our cultural behaviors have changed quite a bit. That being said, this legend was believed to be the cause for some 100-plus Hmong deaths in the years following the Vietnam War. The scary thing about this legend is that it is remarkably close to home, to my family, and the community as a whole. Our cultural community has stayed very tight, so all the elders and adults pretty much know each other. When something good or bad happens, everyone talks about it. If there is a scandal, everyone knows about all the gritty details, and is quick to disown offenders, a good and sad thing. In the years following our arrival to the US, many young Hmong youth took up American lifestyles, trying to fit in. This was hard, as discrimination was difficult to combat. Thus, many Hmong gangs were created. Lots of crime happened, and it was during these years that nightmare deaths by the Dab Tsog seemed to occur the most. I was only a kid during this time, and I recalled how there were so many funerals for young people that we went to, like a lot. Most of them killed by gang violence, but some also from the sudden nightmare deaths. My family converted to Roman Catholicism before we immigrated out of Laos, so we didn't necessarily believe in the Dab Tsog, which is exactly why the shaman elders believed this was happening. To this day, there hasn't been a sufficient explanation for why this happened, or why it slowed down. Sleep paralysis does not fully explain the death part of relatively normal and healthy men. More plausible explanations about sudden changes in diet and lifestyle could be the case, but it does not explain why it happened so fast to first-generation American-born Hmong. Additionally, there is the obvious question, why did it only happen to men? I know of no cases where it happened to women, which boggles my mind. Although our own religious beliefs discount the Dab Tsog, our beliefs as Catholics led us to assume that it was not a spirit demanding our worship, but a demon attacking our young men because we no longer worshipped it anymore. This led to many house blessings. An urban legend from my town I hear a lot is the Lady of the Lake. Llwyny Fan Phoc is a remote lake, where a farmer named Gwyn Fit and lost his lover. He fell in love with a woman who went from the water and she agreed to marry him under the condition that he never struck her 3 times, or she would leave forever. For years they were happily married with 3 sons, but when he struck her playfully a 3rd time she disappeared, and he never saw her again. Their sons did though. She would come from the lake to teach them the powers of healing with herbs and plants. They became skillful physicians and so did their kids. Some of their remedies have survived and still remain in the Red Book of Harvest, a medieval manuscript of immense importance. Angelista is a story about the villagers of Llangefni learning their fate from a supernatural being under the boughs of a 3,000-year-old yew tree. Each year on Halloween and July 31st, the Angelista is said to appear in the medieval church of Llangefni in Conwy. On those days, it announces the names of parish members who will die shortly after. The kingdom of Maes Gwydion, better known as Cantor's Gaylord, is the most interesting one to me myself. It is said that it lies under the Irish Sea in Cardigan Bay, and it was ruled by Gwydion Garami, norms circa 520 AD. The land was extremely fertile but depended on a dike to protect it from the sea. In around 600 AD, a heavy storm blew from southwest, driving the spring tide against the sea walls. The appointed guard, Septenia, was a heavy drinker and a friend of the king's, was at a party in the king's palace near Aberystwyth. The water gates ended up left open and the sea drowned over 16 villages in the land of Catracts. People don't expect this sort of stuff from a country like Wales, but we actually have remarkably interesting stuff here. It's extremely satisfying to see people's faces when I tell them that the inventor of the miniskirt, despite being in London, was Welsh and of Welsh parents. I grew up in rural Virginia. Near my town there's a place called Gravity Hill that has a legend of a group of slaves dying from being crushed by a wagon they were pushing up the hill. It's essentially a dirt road not maintained by the state just off a main road. You drive up the slight incline slowly and then put your car in neutral. You roll back slightly but then the car starts moving forward from being pushed by the ghosts of the slaves. My friends and I tried it one time with 2 cars, and it worked to our surprise. We always thought it was BS. Here's the crazy part. We met up at a local gas station to get drinks and noticed dusty handprints all over the cars. Large hands, medium-sized hands, even baby hands. My parents were out of town at the time and the day before I hand-washed/waxed my car and kept it in the garage. So, handprints of my own would have been washed off. I took pictures with my film camera, this was 1999, and every picture I took of the cars didn't develop properly except for one, which had streaks and imperfections. Every other photo on that roll that wasn't related to the cars came out perfectly. I typically don't believe in haunting spirits and whatnot, but after this I have to wonder. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. When I was a teenager, my mom took my sister and I on a trip to a small Mexican town where she grew up. Upon arrival she was delighted to find that not a lot had changed. While having lunch at a little plaza she told us about stuff she would get into as a kid, growing up. Then her face went blank, and she looked worried for a second. We badgered her into telling us what was up, and she said she just remembered an old story about a vineyard on the outskirts of the small town. She said they used to say the dead walked there on moonless nights. Needless to say, my weirdo sis and I were thrilled and wanted to have a look at this vineyard. Turns out we had to drive past it on our way to my mom's cousin's house, which was where we were staying. So, the story went those years and years ago, 2 couples from a neighboring town had gone to a dance in the small town plaza. On their drive back home, their car stalled out and they all got out. It was very dark because there was no moon. The guys decided to walk back into town together for help and the girls locked themselves in the car to await their return. For a while they talked excitedly about the dance, and all was fine, but gradually they both started to hear noises coming from outside. Dragging footsteps and moans. At first they thought the guys were playing a prank, but that didn't seem to be the case. Suddenly one of the guys ran up to the car demanding to be let in. They let him in, and he locked the door and was in a blind panic. He kept saying they took him, but couldn't answer anything else, eventually just passed out. The following morning a nearby farmer saw the car and stopped to see if there was any trouble. The guy that made it back had torn clothing and scratches. The girls were fine. And some weeks later the other guy's remains were found. He'd been partially consumed. So, zombies, we asked my mom. She shrugged but said she made sure never to go out that way after dark. You're walking in the woods, there's no one around and your phone is dead. Out of the corner of your eye you spot him, Shia LaBeouf. He's following you about 30 feet back. He gets down on all fours and breaks into a sprint. He's gaining on you, Shia LaBeouf. You're looking for your car, but you're all turned around. He's almost upon you now and you can see there's blood on his face. My God, there's blood everywhere. Running for your life, from Shia LaBeouf. He's brandishing a knife, it's Shia LaBeouf. Lurking in the shadows, Hollywood superstar Shia LaBeouf. Living in the woods, Shia LaBeouf. Killing for sport, Shia LaBeouf. Eating all the bodies, actual, cannibal. Now it's dark and you seem to have lost him, but you're hopelessly lost yourself, stranded with a murderer. You creep silently through the underbrush. Aha. In the distance a small cottage with a light on. Hope. You move stealthily toward it, but your leg. Ah. It's caught in a bear trap. Gnawing off your leg, quiet, quiet. Limping toward the cottage, quiet, quiet. Now you're on the doorstep sitting inside, Shia LaBeouf sharpening an axe, Shia, but he doesn't hear you enter, Shia LaBeouf. You're sneaking up behind him, strangling superstar Shia LaBeouf, fighting for your life with Shia LaBeouf, wresting a knife from Shia LaBeouf, stab it in his kidney, safe at last from Shia LaBeouf. You limp into the dark woods, blood oozing from your stump leg. You've beaten Shia LaBeouf. Wait. He isn't dead. Shia, surprise. There's a gun to your head, and death in his eyes, but you can do jiu-jitsu. Body slam superstar Shia LaBeouf. Legendary fight with Shia LaBeouf. Normal Tuesday night for Shia LaBeouf. You try to swing an axe at Shia LaBeouf, but blood is draining fast from your stump leg. He's dodging every swipe, he parries to the left, you counter to the right, you catch him in the neck, you're chopping off his head. Now you have just decapitated Shia LaBeouf. His head topples to the floor, expressionless. You fall to your knees and catch your breath. You're finally safe from Shia LaBeouf. Gutman's Bridge in Denton, Texas. The legend goes that years ago, there was a black man that lived under the bridge who had goats, basically just a small farm. I don't remember all the details, but it said he was hanging from the bridge. At night, it said that you can see a half man, half goat on the bridge. He allegedly haunts that bridge and the surrounding woods. I've actually been there with a group of friends in the middle of the night, roughly about 3 a.m. for the supposed devil's hour. Didn't see any goat man, but those woods were creepy. There's a sign on the other side of the bridge that used to have a bunch of satanic drawings on it. Probably just a bunch of edgy teens that made it. However, I did find out shortly after that most people claim you have to sit at one end of the bridge and invite him. We didn't do that, so who knows. Those woods were pretty creepy though. There is this girl home alone at night and she watches the news. There is a story about a serial killer who escaped from a prison and is currently in the area of her house. So, she closes all the windows, doors, and locks them. But she forgets about the basement. She then hides under the bed with her dog. She slowly falls asleep, but a loud noise wakes her up. She reaches for her dog who licks her hand, and she hears dripping, which her being scared reaches for the dog again which licks her hand. She falls asleep but another loud sound wakes her up, she reaches for the dog, but it isn't there and the dripping sound is still there, so she searches for him, she turns on the light in the bedroom and the dog is maimed, hanging from the ceiling with blood still dripping from it. A message on the wall behind it says, "Dogs are not the only ones who can lick," written in the dog's blood. A tale I heard from a substitute teacher when I was in 2nd grade. A group of filmmakers were done shooting a movie in Gobi Desert and most of the crew members went back to UB. The actor was driving back to UB in a Jeep with around 3 other crew members at around 1 a.m. It was dark and they were all tired. After driving in the empty desert for a while, they come across a single yurt, a Mongolian tent that the nomads live in. Since nomads live together in groups, it's unusual to see a single yurt that had nothing around it. They decided to stop and rest there for a while and drink some warm milk tea. They all got off their Jeep and approached the yurt. The sound of fire crackling was coming off from yurt, so they asked if somebody was there. An old lady, around 70, comes out and invites all of them to come in. Nobody was there except the old lady. The lady offers all of them a drink, so they gratefully gulp it, but something was odd. The drink was completely cold. They clearly see the fire crackling and the steam. The actor then felt a sudden chill down their spine. Something was wrong. They all left the yurt and drove away as quickly as they could from the yurt. Back in UB, the director expected the actor to come back soon but they never came back. Nothing was found. Was terrified to the point that I couldn't sleep. We have a local college that has the largest campus in the U.S. There is an old road built during the FDR New Deal days, known as CCC Road that has 7 bridges, very small bridges that go across a creek. If you take 7 friends and leave a friend at each bridge on the way in, when you turn around and come back down the same road you will lose a friend. You cross 7 bridges in and only 6 come out. Cannot confirm. Do not have 7 friends. Orbs have also been seen in the woods surrounding the area. The road leads to what is known on the books as a tiny old Methodist church, but the folks that go down CCC Road claim it is actually an occultic church used for devil worship complete with satanic imagery, and that on quiet evenings you can hear eerie music coming from inside even though it has not been in use for decades. My area is full of local urban legends. It's common for us as a family to go spook spotting in these areas. Some are creepier than others. Some have found out to be based on fact. Here's some of the more popular ones. The light is a common urban legend in my area. Unsurprisingly, I live literally by the area. The story goes that there was once a railroad track that ran through what is now a dirt road. One night a man with an oil lamp was walking in the area, looking for his wife. Unfortunately, as he found his wife while on the tracks he was struck by the train, leaving the wife a widow. It's said that the green light that appears every summer is the now widow, forever coming back to mourn his death. They say if you go there at night in the summer with your car and flash the headlights 3 times before cutting the engine, the eerie green light will appear. There have also been reports of light messing with radios in the area. The light is strangely a form of swamp gas, as our town was founded in such. Unknown as to why you only see it in that area, Coldwater, there is a now abandoned community. Again unsurprisingly I live by the area. It's a road away from the previous legend, once called collectively as Coldwater. It is all but inhabited at this point, with only one house being resided in. It was apparently a booming community back in the day, having its own church, its own stables, and its own cemetery. All of which are still standing but have gone into disrepair from nature and natural disasters. Due to the community no longer existing, and the old roads always flooding in the rains, the state decided to dig a better dirt road, which would split the cemetery in half. For decades it was rumored that the dead weren't relocated from under the road, as there were uprooted tombstones just being cleaned up against the trees by the piles. I have known of this legend since I was a child, as many people avoided the road in fear of falling into a morbid sinkhole. Unfortunately, years ago, when passing the road after a bit of rain, the legend was true. Our cars sunk in and became stuck, and to our horror, it was, in fact, a coffin. Police were called and we were pulled out, but to this day I have no idea if they just filled the hole back up or actually removed the dead. It still scares me to think about it. Crybaby Bridge. This is a bridge just across from the light. It is said that if you go at night, say the Lord's Prayer backwards, you will hear the wailing of an infant. Stories vary from a murdered goat farmer to a drowned mother, but the one I hear most often is this one: the baby was a result of a cheating wife. The woman was unhappy with her husband and cheated on him with a black man, becoming pregnant with his child. She had carried the baby to term, but the husband was incensed to find out that only had she cheated, but she had done it with a black man. This story is insanely old. So, one night the husband snatched the baby from its bed, alerting the mother when it cried. The husband carried the baby to the bridge, the mother chasing behind, and tossed the child into the river. It is said that the baby cried and screamed until it had died. I have many other urban legends, but I don't want to make this too long. A legend from my part of the globe. My society is still rather misogynistic, and at the time of this tale, it was even more so, with most girls not even taught to read and write. However, some of the more liberal fathers would have their daughters educated privately. The tale's hero was a child prodigy who managed to become pretty famous all around the region. Well, it is customary to hold an annual competition for scholars with huge prestige and prize money attached. The little lady is so admired that her teacher gets her to put in her name for the competition. Result? The girl wins most of the round easily, much to the horror of the other competitors. She has answered every question posed to her, and she is one question away from walking off with the title. Now, the male competitors and quiz experts are getting desperate. So, the questioner opts for a loaded question. What is the greatest physical pleasure? The girl answers, making love. The audience erupts in shocked horror. Problem: the girl is unmarried. If she has any idea making love is pleasurable, but it would of course be impossible for her to have made a logical deduction. Chaos ensues. The girl is of a rich upper-class family who must at all costs defend their repute. She is cast out of her home. Left helpless, the girl commits suicide right in front of the quizmaster's house. That much is historical truth, creepy on its own. The legend is what follows. The quizmaster's son is found drowned the next day. Then another son, wife, brothers, all in all, the quizmaster's family becomes extinct. Smallpox begins to spread in the village, till one by one all the scholars who challenged the girl end up dead. The day the last of the challengers died, the plague ceases. It is believed that the girl's spirit can still be seen wandering the village paths as she did after being cast out. My friend who is now a nurse told me this one. A girl was at a club with her roommates, and she was dancing with a guy, and they really started vibing. They made out a bit and he was trying to get her to come home with him. She decided to head home with her roommate but swapped numbers with the guy to make plans another time. She woke up the next morning with a rash on her face and didn't think too much of it, but throughout the day it quickly began to spread. She went to the doctors, and they ran a culture on the rash. The results caused a bit of a frenzy because the rash was a flesh-eating bacterium that grows on corpses while decomposing. She then had to tell the doctor everything she had done within the past few days to backtrack. She made out with that boy. They then started texting to arrange plans at his place. The police officers arrived at his house and there were dead bodies belonging to several young women he had lured back to his place. He would have sex with the bodies, transferring the bacteria from them to the girl he met at the club. There are a lot of holes to be poked in this, but initially I was freaked. There was a woman who bought a wig from a shop. It was long, straight, beautiful black hair and made from real hair through donation. After having worn that wig for a while, she started to have a nightmare about a young girl terrorizing her, asking her to stop taking what did not belong to her. The woman then returned to the shop shortly after to inform the seller. The seller said no customers had ever lodged such a complaint, but she would look into it. The seller went to the woman's house a couple of days later to urgently tell her about the wig's history. When she got to the woman's house, the woman came to answer the door dressing and acting like a little girl. Inside the house, it was messy and full of kids' toys. The woman then came to speak to the seller in a foreign accent. "Sister, I want to go home." The seller ran for her life. The history of the wig was that it was stolen from a cemetery of a trafficked foreign child labor who died from extreme working conditions. My grandma used to tell the best tales, some spooky ones of ghosts of people who has just died somewhere, and relatives/friends would see the person enter the house and pass by, then vanish around the corner, only to find out they had been actually not even in the city, dying on a car crash at that very moment. One tale she used to tell was of the mula senkabika, a headless mule that spewed constant fire from where the head was meant to be. She never really explained what caused that to exist. From what I read, it was usually a woman being cursed for committing some sort of sin, likely humping a priest, nor how to get rid of the curse, but she used to freak us kids out, since in her version, if you heard the galloping noise, you should never look outside, even through small gaps in the curtains or keyholes, because if you saw the fire you'd turn into stone. I wonder if she made that mix of headless mule with Medusa herself, or if it was passed on to her like that, but in a small town, southwest Brazil, that had folk using horses quite a bit, it was spooky enough hearing horse/mule noises at night. She was a great storyteller and I miss her. Copper was found in a nearby area, and this Dutch immigrant went into the Superstition Mountains to look for copper and frequently come with bags filled. People obviously noticed and tried following him to his mine to get a part of that wealth, but each time they would lose sight of him and wouldn't be able to find the mine. One day while evading a follower, the Dutchman fell to his death. Now no one has ever found the mine if it is real, and those that go looking go mad and are never seen again. It goes back and forth between a gold and copper mine. There are lots of other stories about the La Llorona, skinwalkers, chupacabras, and all of that good stuff here too. Since Arizona has a lot of Hispanics and Native Americans, we get stories from both cultures. In NJ there is a road called Clinton Road that is supposedly haunted at this one curve. Granted, it is a dangerous curve. There's a legend that someone was hit while walking around the curve and change from their pockets flew all over the road. So, if you take a handful of change late at night, and toss it from your car into the woods, the change gets thrown back. It happened to me once. I freaked, till I realized someone threw the coins out the window and over the top of the car, and it was just the coins they threw hitting my car roof.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe, The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.